Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. Each and every week, obviously, Kelce's the top tight end. Last week, another big game for Kelce. He had 100 yards at halftime. And this week here versus a Charger defense that really can't stop anyone. He's number 1 once again in a potential shootout, over 50 points combined by both teams. Number 2, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So Mark Andrews, so far this season, the numbers haven't been all that great. He's pretty much had 2 good games. He has mid-performances here for Mark Andrews. But this week here versus the Detroit Lions, I think Andrews could go out there and have a decent game. Him and Lamar got to get back on the same page. They got to start stretching the field a little bit. I know Lamar's taken some big hits this season and looking to run with the football just a little bit too much, I believe, in my opinion here, is Lamar Jackson. Andrews, he's a big-time target. He's been a top 2, top 3 tight end for multiple seasons now. And this week here versus the Lions, I think Andrews gets on track a little bit more. And I know he's not been playing 100%, but I got him at 2. Number 3, TJ Hawkinson of the Minnesota Vikings. So now with Jefferson out a few weeks here, missed last week's game, obviously was the start of his IR stint. TJ Hawkinson has to step up and start making plays, and him and Kirk Cousins definitely have a good rapport. And Hawkinson should get more targets in this game. See them running the football a lot for positive type of gains is this Minnesota Viking team. So right now it's going to be the ball in Kirk Cousins' hand. And like I said, him and TJ Hawkinson have a good rapport, and more targets are going to go around now with Justin Jefferson out. So this week I think Hawkinson once again could be a top tight end. And I got him at 3. Number 4, Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions. So Sam Laporta, the first 4 weeks of the season, he's really been having big ball games. I know last week the numbers were down a little bit, but he's still the number 2 target in that passing game, in my opinion, is Sam Laporta. Behind, obviously, Ross St. Brown, who's been one of the best wide receivers in the league. But Sam Laporta, he's a matchup nightmare for safeties and linebackers. He's been working the middle of the field, and he's even got some speed as well, where we've seen him catch some deep balls this season. So Jared Goff has good confidence in him. I know it's a tough matchup with the Baltimore Ravens, but on volume and just the role he has in this offense and a big red zone threat early in his rookie year, I like Laporta at 4. Number 5, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Evan Ingram, he's been a nice threat for this Jaguar team over the last season and a half. Him and Trevor Lawrence have a good rapport. I know Lawrence, it's going to come down to the wire if he plays in this game or not. But Evan Ingram, he can run all the routes. He can line up on the outside as well as a wide receiver if you need him to. And pretty much he's the number 2 or 3 target in this passing game, because some weeks Calvin Ridley gets a lot of targets to Christian Kirk. But for the most part, Evan Ingram, his targets are solidified 7 or 8 per game, it seems like. And a guy who can make plays all over the field, like I mentioned. So this week, even if Lawrence is not going to play and C.J. Beathard has to come in, I think Ingram's still going to be a security blanket, still a player that can make plays. And this week in an indoor game in New Orleans, even though their defense is stout, it's still plus being indoors. Number 6, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Goddard, it was a little worrisome the first 4 weeks of the season, but the last 2 weeks he's wrote the ship, and he's back as a mainstay in this offense for this Philly team. So Jalen Hurts, he's been getting the ball to Goddard more. Week 5 at the Rams, we saw 8 catches, 117 yards. And then last week versus a tough New York Jet defense, he did have 9 fantasy points, was Dallas Goedert. So this week here in a monster potential shootout game versus the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football, I think Dallas Goedert, once again, he gets that 9+ fantasy point game minimum in this one. And I like him at 6. Number 7, Darren Waller of the New York Giants. So Waller, the big offseason acquisition from the Vegas Raiders. And they needed a guy, a playmaker in this offense. They still really don't have a true number 1 wide receiver. A bunch of 2 and 3 guys at best with Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson over there for this New York Giant team, Isaiah Hodgins. But Darren Waller works the middle of the field. He could make plays, yards after catch as well. And this week, a good matchup here versus the Washington Commanders, where we just saw Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts both have double-digit fantasy days. I think Waller has a good game in this one. But the only thing, obviously, with this Giant team, the offensive line, one of the worst lines in the league. And Daniel Jones and Waller really haven't been on the same page. So if Daniel Jones is starting in this game, numbers might take a little bit of a hit, but Tyrod Taylor definitely was getting the football out quicker and finding Waller more in that game versus Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. But anyway, he's 7. Number 8, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. So George Kittle, so far this season, he's had 2 good games. He's done nothing the other 4 games. He is George Kittle. But right now with Deebo Samuel possibly out in this one here at the Minnesota Vikings, I think he can make some plays as Kittle. He does have 3 touchdowns on the season, even though I know 3 of them were in one game versus the Dallas Cowboys. in Week 5. And his other good game was another home game versus the Giants, 7 catches, 90 yards in that one. But this week here, the weak Minnesota secondary and linebacking crew, I think he could make some plays as George Kittle. McCaffrey and Debo played, they're not going to be 100%. And Kittle's got to step up and make plays, and I think he will in this one. So I got him at 8. Number 9, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. So Kyle Pitts, the first month of the season, we didn't see much, and it's not a Pitts problem. This offense, the problem is Desmond Ridder not getting the ball in places where his playmakers can make plays. But the last 2 weeks here, Pitts is definitely getting things going, and he even found the end zone in last week's game. So this week here in a tougher matchup with a good Tampa Bay Buck defense, Kyle Pitts, though, still can make some plays. Like I said, Jonnu Smith and Kyle Pitts have been the main targets the last few weeks here for Desmond Ridder. And I think this team should go to Taylor Heineke at the quarterback position, because he's a quarterback that he's not scared to gunsling it. He's got a decent arm, and he gets that ball down the field where Ridder, a lot of dump offs and a lot of small intermediate routes. With Kyle Pitts, like I said, he could burn linebackers and safeties. He's just that good at the tight end position. So right now, this week, the last few weeks have looked good, and hopefully he stays the pace. So I got him in 9. Number 10, Luke Musgrave of the Green Bay Packers. So coming off the bye week, this Packer team, let's see if they could get things back in order after losing the last 2 weeks here. And Jordan Love and Musgrave in the early going so far this season. They had a good rapport, missed a game with a concussion. So this week here, good matchup at the Denver Broncos, one of the worst defenses in the league, where I think Musgrave, he could take advantage and have a decent ball game. And obviously a young quarterback security blanket is a tight end. So Musgrave back in action this week, coming off the bye in a good matchup. I got him at 10. Number 11, Jonnu Smith of the Atlanta Falcons. So Jonnu Smith, he's been solid, and you rarely see it nowadays where 2 tight ends could be productive on one team and both have fantasy value. So far, Jonnu Smith, he's scoring fantasy points. Last week, a double-digit game here for him. But even though now people are catching on to Jonnu Smith, I could see where he pretty much does nothing. So I'm not putting a huge stock into Jonnu Smith, but the numbers do not lie so far in the early going this season. So I know it's a tough matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a solid defense and a good linebacking crew. But I still think Jonnu Smith, for the most part, could outproduce some of the guys after him. So I got him in 11. Number 12, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders. So last week, it was a dud performance for Thomas. Only 1.20 fantasy points in PPR leagues. After the week before that, he had over 20 fantasy points. But this week here, good matchup at the New York Giants. Their defense don't really stop anyone for the most part, even though I know last week they did hold the Bills down to 14 points. But I think Logan Thomas and Sam Howell have been on the same page. And the only problem with Thomas has obviously been health over the last few seasons. But so far this year, he's been healthy for the most part. And this week here with a good matchup and a big red zone target at 6-7. I like him at 12. Number 13, Michael Mayer of the Vegas Raiders. So Mayer, the last 2 weeks, he's more involved in this offense. More targets coming his way. He's a tight end that they traded up in the 3rd round to get his Vegas Raider team. And he could go out there and make plays. So right now, it's going to either be Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Donnell most likely starting quarterback, with Jimmy Garoppolo banged up with a back injury once again. And it's a good matchup at the Chicago Bears. They're one of the worst defensive teams in all pro football. And like I said, Mayer, the last few weeks, he's getting into the offense and making plays with coverage. Obviously rolled Devontae Adams' way, and even Jacoby Myers as well, and Josh Jacobs in the backfield, where teams got to be accountable for. So right now, where he's pretty much got one-on-one coverage on linebackers with just zone defense on him, Michael Mayer's going out there and making plays, and I got him at 13. 14, Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So right now, as it seems, it looks like Freiermuth might be back after only missing a game and then having the bye week for the Steelers team. So Deontay Johnson will be back in the lineup as well. George Pickens, he's looked good so far this season. So this offense is getting healthy, and they're getting weapons back. So right now, Freiermuth, he's been a touchdown dependable tight end so far this season. So this week here for Freiermuth, well, this game's at Los Angeles, an indoor game, which is always a plus. And this Ram defense, a middle-of-the-pack type of defense. I think Freiermuth could go in there and have a decent performance, but still, I got him at 14th. And the 15th and final tight end I'm ranking this week here, Zach Ertz of the Arizona Cardinals. So Zach Ertz, the first 4 weeks of the season, definitely was putting up solid fantasy numbers, but the last few weeks, the targets have gone down. And defenses obviously have transitioned and adjusted to Joshua Dobbs and knowing what he's going to do and where he wants to put the football. So right now, Zach Ertz, the last few weeks, definitely the numbers have gone down, but it's going to be another game where they're trailing, I believe, early and often. They're going to have to play catch-up, and Ertz could get some receptions in the middle of the field. So after 2 games where he really hasn't done much, But now in a matchup with a division opponent here, I think Ertz bounces back. That's a good game. So that's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking for week 7 of the fantasy football season.